Matt mentioned the ability to replace a board member, and so it's very exciting to announce that Lauren Eckert is the board member that the board voted on, and so she is our new board member. Our first alumni board member. Lauren attended WCA, and she has her degree in psychology and education, degree in counseling, school counseling, guidance counseling. She taught here as well as attending here. Taught, I think, drama and worked in missions and just did a lot of things for us. And she was a guidance counselor at Holy Cross, right? And she now has a real counseling practice, a lot of families and students that she works with, a team of counselors that she helps direct, and so has a broad and deep experience in what kids are dealing with these days. So just a real blessing for her to come aboard the board as one of our board directors, and then to do this kind of thing for us and for you guys. A number of our teachers are here. We appreciate that, to benefit from this kind of thing. So Lauren, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I think I'll put this here because I like to talk with my hands. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, good evening. As James said, I am a former WCA student, a former WCA teacher, and now a member of the board. So WCA and this family and community has always been a big part of my life. I think my family has been involved in WCA in some way for the past 28 years. So it's really been a big part of our lives, and I'm so glad to be back and connected with the community serving on the board. So tonight I'm here to share with you and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that families are facing today with our culture and technology use, and just some of the challenges that maybe you started experiencing or you know might be on the horizon for your family. Some of you I know here might have younger children, students who maybe just started their first few weeks of kindergarten, while others are thinking about sending your child off to college in a few months. So there's a range of families, also those of you here with grandchildren that you are interacting with and partaking in raising them and being a part of their lives as well. So I'm going to do my best tonight to talk to all of you and share information that's relevant to everyone. A lot of the information that I'm going to share really focuses on that adolescent time period. So for those of you with younger children, relevant and something to kind of have on your mind, a lot of the strategies that I'm going to share tonight are things you can start doing now and implementing now. And also, some of this is starting to affect younger and younger children. So those of you with older children, maybe some of the things I talk about happened yesterday in your house, and so it might be even more relevant for you as you think about some of these strategies. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about my current work, because I do think it's relevant as I create kind of a framework of what I'm going to talk about this evening. So as James mentioned, I taught for a few years, and while I was here, I was completing my master's in education in school counseling, and from there went on to work as a school counselor for a few years. And during that time, I had a really unique perspective, no longer in the classroom, but able to really get a pulse on the social and the emotional well-being of the students that I was interacting with. And just even in the few years that I was in that setting and working in that environment, noticed a shift. It was almost happening every few months. And the amount of technology that was being consumed by my students, and the amount of anxiety I was seeing among the students I was working with, I was noticing that they were more and more connected, communicating constantly, but reporting that they were feeling increasingly isolated. They didn't have anyone to talk to. I found this to be very interesting, very concerning, but my view was limited to what I saw during the school day. In my current work, I get to go into the homes. So I'm working with families in their homes, and it's expanded my perspective and my observations to what's happening after the school day ends. So that's really what I'm going to speak from today, building in a little bit of research and some observations of my own, just to provide a framework around what is happening and what our young people are experiencing some tools for you, but also just to kind of open this conversation up and really think about the things that we need to start considering as our children are becoming more and more connected to technology and to the things out there in the world. So let's go ahead and dive in. So maybe some of you all have had these thoughts before. What am I supposed to do about my students' social media use? How do I handle raising my child in a world where technology is so prevalent and information is so available? How am I supposed to help my child be grounded in their faith and the truth of God's Word while also helping them know how to successfully navigate this world? Things are changing rapidly, constantly, and technology plays a big role in that. Think back to when you were in 9th grade. What did you do with your free time? I don't think you were Snapchatting your friends. Am I right? So what were you doing with your free time? How did you and your friends interact? How did you share information and your feelings with your friends? How did rumors spread around your school? Things are very different now. We are living in a time where binging Netflix series is considered a hobby. I'm not knocking it, I'm just saying that's our reality, okay? So teenagers are more connected to what's going on in the media and in television than they are to even in a lot of what's going on in their friends' lives. In the Washington Post last week, following the Emmys, an article read, "Hey America, there's never been a better time to tune out reality by tuning into and collapsing into the comfort of your multiple TV screens. Unload your anxieties by sticking to the couch." While this sounds a little over the top, it is partially our reality. Teens are starting to tune out reality and tune in to technology. Tonight we're going to focus mostly on communication. I have about 20 minutes with you guys, so I could go on any one of these topics for much, much longer, but I really just want to provide a little snippet, and as I said, an opportunity for hopefully future conversations around this topic. In my opinion, communication is the most crucial piece of this parent-child relationship. It's also where I am seeing the greatest breakdown in the homes that I'm in. I want to, specifically speak to you all as followers of Christ, raising covenant children, and there's an extra element that I don't often get to speak about when I talk to parents. In this scripture in Deuteronomy it says, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." It says you shall talk with your children about the words God has given us in the scriptures. This idea of talking, I'm not assuming that you all are not talking with your children and that conversations aren't being had with adults and children. But I am observing and seeing a shift in the way these conversations are happening and the frequency in which they are happening in homes. So as I said, from my experience being in the home, I'm in many homes of families of all different backgrounds, different situations, students who are experiencing all sorts of challenges. A lot of the students I work with do have some form of a diagnosis, so many have anxiety and depression or ADHD, but I also work with a lot of students who are just trying to get through school, trying to get through what they're doing. And what I have seen in all of those homes is that the source of the greatest tension occurring in that home is related to either poor communication, no communication, or miscommunication. I also have identified, by speaking separately with the parents and then the child, that the goal is common. The parent wants their child to be happy, to be successful, to thrive in their current environment. Likewise, the student wants to be happy, wants to be successful, wants to demonstrate to their parent that they're capable. But somewhere in the middle, there's a breakdown in communication. And often that's because of the way things are being communicated back and forth. So this issue of a parent-child struggle is certainly not new, right? It's normal, it's developmentally correct that as students enter adolescence, they begin to crave independence. They push back, they test the waters a bit. And that's why the role of the parent is so crucial. You're there to provide guidance, instruction, and discipline, to help teach them resiliency when they do have failures and make mistakes, to help them celebrate and appropriately navigate their successes. That's the role of the parent. So while this struggle is not new, I believe and I feel that it's becoming more apparent that the context for the struggle has changed, and that's because of technology. So this group of young people that we have coming up through school now has known and experienced technology for the entirety of their lives. That's new. There's no other generation who's had this amount of access to information, media, constantly for the entirety of their lives. So we're starting to see the results of that. This group of young people, as I mentioned before, is more connected than ever, but also more isolated. And I'm going to speak to that in a second. So because these young people have learned to communicate primarily through technology, it's created a gap in the communication from parent to child. Once again, I am not saying that you don't know what's going on in your child's life and that the families I work with, the parents don't have fun experiences together and talk about the things that are on their child's mind. But I do think it's becoming more and more challenging to have those conversations, especially around those tense topics. They're different in every home, but I see a lot of the same topics and conversations that come into those big blow-up fights. For example, what's your homework tonight, right? A simple question with good intentions that turns into a challenge. What are you doing on your phone all day, right? A simple question with good intentions that really, really gets both people in the conversation fired up. So we can't just eliminate technology, although maybe that would be nice in some instances, right? So that's not the solution, but the solution is that while they're still in your homes and while they're still under your authority as a parent, helping them learn how to properly use technology as a tool, how to communicate with adults and communicate with people apart from technology. When you can communicate to your friend how you feel by sending a little emoji or a quick Snapchat, it doesn't feel necessary to sit down and have great conversation at length about how you feel. And working in a counseling setting, as I did previously, I found that students really had a difficult time putting their feelings into words. And so I use a lot of strategies to help them get those feelings out. Now, obviously, every kid is different. You have the kid who can't stop talking about their feelings, and then you have the kid who never speaks, right? So, and there's everybody in between. So once again, there's no one size fits all, but you get to know your child, and you get to know the ways that they express themselves. So I want to share just a few quick statistics with you. So this information is taken from two different sources, which I'll give to you at the end. But on any given day, an American teenager, aged 13 to 18, is consuming an average of 9 hours of entertainment media on any given day. That does not include time on technology during the school day, so there's 8 hours, and any time doing homework, which they are on technology while they're doing homework. I ran a seminar for students this summer, and I heard a similar statistic, and I thought, there's absolutely no way this is correct. This is crazy. And so I asked them, I said, how many hours do you think you spend on your phone or on some screen a day after school? 9 was the lowest number I heard from that group. And this was with no parents present. So this is a reality that they're consuming screens. And here's the thing about younger children. So those of you with younger kids who think, well, my kid's not 13, I've got time. Children 8 to 12 years old are consuming an average of 6 hours of entertainment media daily. Now remember, this is occurring in that period of time where they're in the home in the evenings. So this is really something we have to be aware of and really have to think through how we respond to that. So 2 more quick graphics I just want to show you to give you a better understanding of what we're talking about. So I don't know, you probably can't see all the details from back there, but this is just a graph talking about when the iPhone was released in 2007, we have seen a very sharp decline. There's many statistics of different topics that show this similar idea, that students are spending less time hanging out in person with their friends. So once again, maybe in the back of our mind, we're like, maybe that's a good thing in high school, right? But what it means is that the amount of hours per week they are spending with their friends, apart from their parents, has decreased significantly. When we consider this next to a statistic like this, same marker, 2007, the year the iPhone was released, look at this sharp incline of students, high school students, and students as young as 8th grade reporting feelings of isolation and loneliness, right? So as I said before, more connected than ever, but more isolated than ever. So what does that mean for parents? What does that mean for those of you in the home where you have this opportunity before they go off to college to help them figure out how they can be connected, consume media, enjoy technology, but not be so isolated where they don't have people feeding into their soul, feeding into who they are as a person. So before I get to some of the tools, I wanted to share, I thought this was a little God moment last week. I was with one of my clients. He's a senior in high school, and he said, would you look over this essay I'm working on for my English class? And the topic was communication and technology, the breakdown. And I thought, well, yes, I will look it over, and can I also steal it? And he said, yes. So I did get his permission, and if anyone wants to read it, I'm happy to send it to you. He was more than happy to share it. But I just want to highlight 2 or 3 points that he made in the essay that I thought was helpful, because I think sometimes as the adults we kind of sit there and we try to observe and talk about how we think things are occurring, but wonder, are the teens even thinking about this? Is this on their radar, or are we just making something that's not there? So he talks about in his essay that he got his first phone that could send text messages when he was 9 years old. And for him, he loved that because he didn't actually have to talk to people to have a social interaction. He also goes on in the essay to talk about the evolution from Facebook to what they are using now, which is Snapchat, which might have changed since I came here tonight. It feels like it's changing all the time. But with Facebook, there was an expectation that when you posted, you shared content. You put information out there, maybe your thoughts or a song, but you typed something. That turned into Twitter, where you only had 140 words, which, as he says, made it easier. And then Instagram, where it's just a picture with maybe a hashtag or two, to now Snapchat, where they can send hundreds, not thousands, of messages back and forth to each other without speaking one word or even typing one word. He concludes his essay by saying, my parents believe that kids have stopped socializing, but we haven't. We're just doing it in our own way with new technology. So once again, there's got to be this balance here. Finding ways to communicate with young people, and I know all of you interact with young people in different ways, whether they're in your home, or they're friends of your children, or they're grandkids, or kids at church, but finding ways to communicate with them, but also helping them learn how to communicate back apart from technology. So my final point that I want to talk about before I share a few ideas, and then happy to take questions at the end here, is stress. So students aren't necessarily experiencing more stress than previous generations. Although some could argue that social media has added different types of stressors with, bullying, social media bullying, people feeling more left out because they're more aware of the events that are going on that they're not invited to. But in general, the expectations and the responsibilities of a teenager hasn't changed that much. However, as I mentioned, they are reporting feeling more isolated. Teens are reporting feeling more stressed than ever before. And I believe personally, and a lot of the research supports, that's because they don't have the proper outlets to communicate the stress, to manage the stress. So once again, not that there is more stress to be experienced necessarily, although social media has played a new role in that, but that their ability to respond to the stress has certainly changed. And this is showing up in our research and our statistics. If you look up what's going on with adolescents right now, the rise in anxiety is through the roof. Depression is on the rise. We're seeing more and more children with sleep issues at younger ages. This affects brain development at a crucial time. My work, I had a slide about it, but I kind of skipped over. I work as an executive function skills coach, and I work with young people and adults to help them with organization strategies, time management, scheduling, setting goals, and finding ways to reach them. The stress that the students I work with are experiencing are impacting all of those skill sets as well. Even the students who don't have another diagnosis that they're dealing with. So I really feel that one of the greatest gifts a parent can give their child, and some of the most successful family settings I've been in as a coach, is learning how to understand and identify their child's stress. Not assuming what the stress is, or fixing the stress, or trying to take away the stress, but learning how to hear from the child what their stressors are, and then also learning how to help their child properly respond to that stress and handle the stress. And what I emphasize, in the same way that this is true about parents who like to stay organized this way and have their notebooks this way, but their kid leaves everything all over the floor, right? Not all stress is the same. So the way you experience stress and the things that make you feel overwhelmed might not bother your child in the slightest, but they might have things that you haven't even thought of that are constantly weighing on their mind. So learning what it is for your particular child that really causes them stress. And likewise, the way you respond to your stress, the things that help you feel relaxed might not be the same as what it is for your child. Finally, we are made to be in community. We know that as Christians, we are meant to be, to share one another's burdens, to support one another, to pray for one another. So if these students are not really finding community in many places right now. So I really believe this needs to be happening in the home. They need to feel a sense of community beyond, this is just the place I sleep and sort of do my homework upstairs with my phone, right? And so once again, not to say that these things aren't happening, that you're not having conversations, and that you don't have a pulse on what's going on in your kids' lives. But I just want to open this conversation and make us aware of how quickly things are changing and how many students and young people are being affected by the increasing amount of technology in their lives. So I am going to share very briefly with you a few strategies that I use with families. I'll emphasize that my time is short. I could talk about any one of these strategies for much longer. I will share my contact information at the end, and I am more than happy to speak to any one of you about these tools that I use and many others that I'm happy to share with you, talk through if you have a situation or a scenario you might want to use it. But today I'm just going to touch very briefly on all four of these. So with the idea of a family contract, I like to think about changing a culture. So if you're changing an environment or a culture, maybe let's say in your work setting, maybe you've had an experience where you have been unhappy at work. You don't like the way things are going, you don't like the policies, maybe some grumbling starts to happen around the coffee station, and the administration gets wind that there's some upset people at work. So they decide they're going to make some major policy changes, adjust everything, and they announce it to you at a staff meeting. And there you sit thinking, well, nobody asked me why I'm upset, what I'm frustrated about, and I don't think that that new policy is even going to address my issue, right? So now there's been a big change made, the problem has been addressed, but you've isolated that staff member even more. This rings true in a family as well. You cannot change a culture or an environment if you don't also include the person who's having the greatest influence on that environment, which is often the child. Once again, this is not to undermine the authority of the parent, the wisdom of the parent, and the role of the parent. Instead, I just, from my experience, and also there's a lot of research to support that when students have choice, when they have a say in something, they're much more likely to buy in. That's where the idea of a contract comes in. Once again, I'm happy to share with you all some templates. There's also some really great ideas online. This doesn't have to, you could call this an agreement if the contract feels too specific. But the idea is you come up with some terms as a family. This can be centered around a family mission statement. It can be centered around reducing screen time in the home. I've seen and helped some families use a contract to better structure how their student is spending their afternoon. Maybe they agree to 2 or 3 hours of homework time uninterrupted, then they get to go outside and play basketball for a few hours. It can be that simple. It's not meant to be a reward structure or a punishment structure. But students do better when they know what's expected of them. Students really do well with clear-cut understanding of what they're supposed to be doing to meet expectations and to thrive. So the contract is a great opportunity to do that. And once again, it can be for the whole family, it can be between one parent and child, and the idea is that there is a response. So if the terms aren't met, or if they're not able to keep up with that, it leads to a conversation. What's preventing you from being able to follow through with this? Where's the breakdown occurring? A second tool that I use with a lot of families that I've found to be one of my favorites, it's very simple, and it's this idea of a communication book. It's a simple notebook that I recommend placing somewhere in a neutral spot in your house. And this is not meant to take away conversation. Speaking should be happening. Instead, it's meant to serve as a tool for conversations that tend to be more tense. So the idea is that some people, I I'm one of them, I do better when I have time to process information and think about how I want to respond. That's how some adults are, and some children are as well. The communication book serves as an opportunity for the parent can put maybe a request in there or a question. Have you worked on your science project this week at all? The child could say, I really want to go hang out with Michael on Friday, right? Whatever it is in your home that tends to be that blow-up conversation that I was talking about before. And if you're not having those, great. And if you've got younger kids, they're coming. So this is just a great way to provide an opportunity to have interaction around this topic without the explosion. Because that what happens, and I've been at homes where these conversations happen when people are present or not, and I see how they just spiral down because both people are so fired up from the last 3 times they had this conversation that neither party is listening to what the request is. So the communication book, like I said, very simple, put it in a neutral spot, and it's something that the parent and the child can both glance at, think about, and then you can respond verbally or back in the book. Once again, I'm happy to talk to you much more length about some examples of how I've used that with families and ways that that's worked well. My third point, I almost didn't put in here, but it's not a new idea, and I know a lot of you are probably already doing this, but I just really want to emphasize once again how important it is to create community in the home. I know that especially as kids get older, they get more busy. Their schedules get busier, so that fun Friday night pizza night that you used to always have maybe has turned into them, grabbing a slice as they run out the door. So really being intentional about the short time that they are living in your home, making time as a family, talking, reading scripture together, asking questions, playing games, but being connected and involved. One thing that I like to do with families is take a look at their calendar and plug in a few specific dates on the calendar that's just family time. But then you have to treat it like any other event. You can't push it away or move it. Treat it like a real scheduled family time. So finally, I have a series of stress management strategies that I use with families. As I mentioned, I think stress is one of the greatest challenges that students are experiencing because they are at an age where they're able to feel a lot of emotions. Their brain knows how to feel all the emotions, but they haven't quite yet developed the parts of their brain that help them regulate the emotions, respond to those emotions, and make good judgment about those emotions. So that's not a really fun time to be in. So stress management is crucial. So I recommend doing a quarterly review with your child. I have some intake forms that I give to families when they do this. Once again, not to say that you don't know what's going on during the day or how their friends are or what types of things are bothering them. But this is meant to be a more in-depth conversation every few months to really get a pulse on what's going on in their lives. Check in and see what's stressing them out. What are they looking forward to in the next few months? What are they really anxious about? Who are their good friends and what are they doing when they spend time with their friends? This is meant to be a positive conversation back and forth. Most importantly is trying to get a sense of the things that are stressing them out and the ways that they're managing this. So I know this is going to be small, but this is an example of a tool that I have a lot of parents give to their child. It's a balance wheel. Some of you might have used this in the past. This is one I made specifically for high school and middle school students. But you shade it in based on the level of satisfaction in that area of your life. You can edit it to be, the amount of hours you're spending on that area, or however you want to do it. But I think satisfaction is helpful. And I've seen some families where the parent says to me, my kid loves their friends, they're so happy, they love school, and then we ask them to fill this out, and they don't even shade in some of the slices. So it's just one tool of many that can give you maybe an indication of how your student's feeling. And then a few months later, when you check back in, have them fill it out again and see if some of the strategies you put in place or some of the conversations you're having maybe address that area where they weren't feeling as supported. I also have a worksheet that I use with families to help you identify stress outlets for your child. As I said, I'm happy to send that to you. This is not as much about the tools as it is, in my opinion, about thinking through this, right? It's something we all know. I probably didn't share that much tonight that was new to you all. A lot of it is stuff you've probably heard, seen, or experienced, and maybe you've even tried some of these strategies in your house. But my purpose is more just creating this conversation, as a community of believers, sharing with one another and talking with one another, another, praying with one another as you raise these young people to grow in their knowledge and love of Christ and into young men and women of God. It's not easy, and I get to see, I'm not a parent, but I get to see every day what parents are struggling with, both Christian families and non-Christian families. And I think that it's just important to pause on occasion and really think through how you're going to respond to these things. Maybe this isn't a challenge in your home, but you have family, friends, or members of your church who are struggling with this. So just pausing to have those conversations. And I do want to emphasize, above all, the importance of prayer in addressing these conversations, sitting down with your child, just praying for those opportunities, praying for their heart to be open to hearing what it is that you have to say. And I love that I get to say that when speaking to you all, because I'm not always able to speak to that part of raising a child. So as I said, just a few references that I used. Actually, one was shared by Dr. Labuda, who sent me last week, that I found really helpful. I'm happy to send you some of these articles as well. And this is my contact information. My website is just laureneckert.com, and there's a contact form. If you are interested, I am more than happy to talk to you about any situation or concern that you have in your family, or to talk through anything I shared tonight. I'm also happy to take questions now if you have some, or after, but that's my contact information. So does anybody have any questions about either what I shared or social media in general? Yes?
Two questions. Go back to the prior screens, I can take a photo.
Of course, yeah. Wait, yes, I can. Yeah. Show me.
The other one is, one of the apps that my wife has the most concerns with is Snapchat, because you do not see what stays on there. I know with one of my daughters, somebody sent some stuff to my daughter that we were not happy that they sent. She told us it. But since it disappears pretty quickly, we had no idea what was actually sent. And sometimes kids are going to read things a certain way. So our daughters are 14 and 15, and when some other people heard that our daughters had Snapchat on their phones, they immediately said, "You've got teenagers with that on there?" When I talked to my kids, they said most of their friends are only able to communicate because with that app, like one has a friend in Brazil, her best friend who was back there, that's the only way she can get a hold of her other people who don't have smartphones. I mean, what's your feeling on best and worst apps?
Well, so the thing about Snapchat I'll speak to is it was not originally intended for the teenage population, but that is the group that is most using Snapchat. And you're correct. Any image that is sent disappears, and that's part of why they like it. There's no way to track what's being said. There's even options in Snapchat to have conversations that are under ghost mode, so it doesn't even look like you're even interacting. So the thing about Snapchat is she's correct. Most high schoolers, that's their primary form of communication. I was at a funeral a couple weeks ago and was sitting next to a young lady, and during the wake, we were just all kind of visiting, I would estimate, sent about 500 Snapchats within a 3-hour window. And I asked her what she was saying or what was happening, because it was pictures of like her ear or like the side of her face, and she said, "I'm telling my friends that I'm sad and having a hard day, and this is just how I keep communicating with them." And I was like, I knew they were using it, but I didn't understand the frequency. So it really is the primary app that they are using. Most of them are off of Facebook. A lot of them don't use Twitter. Instagram is kind of like where they go. So here's the thing, all of the apps are bad and all of the apps are good, right? And they all have access to more information than a 14-year-old probably knows what to do with, but also it's the way they stay connected with their friends. And so that's why, when I said, wouldn't it be great if we could eliminate technology, I feel that there are ways for that parents can navigate and really discuss the use of certain apps. I have found that when parents take the phone as a punishment or delete all of the apps, it just creates rebellion, because they can put the apps on their phone without you knowing. So it's better to teach them how to use the app, to understand the dangers and the problems they might encounter, because removing it has not, in my opinion, ever really been a solution. Now, with some apps and some of the content that they're going to be exchanging on their phones, certain providers will allow you access to view that, right? And so that's a individual family by family call, how much you want to be reading and interacting with it. But Snapchat is certainly, that is how they're communicating with their friends. And if they're connected only with their friends on there, and they have a good friend group, they shouldn't be receiving things that aren't appropriate. If you don't just get random things from outside people. But it's certainly, there's content on there that is not appropriate for a 14-year-old or 15-year-old. So I think it's more about teaching them how to use that application, because removing it, and I have not seen that work well for families, because the student still uses it, but they're just secretive about it, which I think is worse. So. But yes, in terms of other apps, there's a few other apps that are anonymous that you're able to go on and post something in an area and just say like, oh, you know, this girl wore this outfit to school today, and it's anonymous, and that's kind of died down. That was creating a lot of issues for a while, but they're really just on Snapchat. Yes?
How much do you see these young kids using like Marco Polo or Bubble, which I know a lot of the athletes use Bubble. Them using that instead of Snap?
So there's a few, yes. And there was another one, like the house party, that was big. And what's happening is a lot of them are really cool for a few weeks, and by the time their parents catch on to it, they moved on. So yeah, there's always something new coming out, but Snapchat seems to be the most consistent thing. Like I said, I'm with students all day. I go to the schools during the day, and then I'm in the homes in the evening. And I sit there, you know, when your phone's locked and notifications come up, and by the end of 45 minutes, they scroll through tons, all Snapchat. So that seems to be the house party, I think, and a few of those have kind of died down. But once again, it doesn't matter the app. I think Snapchat will be gone in a year, and I don't even know, they'll just be blinking at each other or something. But the point is that it's getting more and more prevalent. The apps are always ahead of whatever we know about, and so it's more about the conversations surrounding how they're using it, their intention on it, and helping them regulate the use so it's not their only way of interacting with other humans. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Lauren, it seems like a lot of our parents have a plan for sort of gradually letting their children get on the phone or you know, not get a smartphone until a certain age, or then introduce apps at different ages. You know, I think about we have graduated driver's licenses, right? It used to be you got just your full license all at once, and then it's like, wow, we wouldn't do that anymore. Right? Have you seen some of that be successful? The parent, especially I think the contract idea, the kids involved in kind of what the plan is.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, one of the challenges is that when you're 9 years old, you know, like this kid that I shared about, and you have access to a smartphone, you are nowhere near ready to be in charge of all of the things that allows you to be in charge of. I had a student, a high school student, that accidentally, arguably, spent $4,500 on their parents' Apple account playing the game. And this was a high schooler. And so that was an issue. And so I can't imagine the things a 9-year-old could do on a smartphone, right? So once again, I understand that with the way the world is, that having the ability to call your parent or text your parent is important. Once again, you can limit what's on their phone, especially if you're just giving them access to text and phone. I do think that it's different for every child. Some children are ready for that type of responsibility much younger than other kids. But once again, removing technology completely, I have never seen as a solution, but I certainly think if your kids are young enough and this hasn't become an issue yet, helping them gradually learn how to use it responsibly is a great thing. Unfortunately, I get brought in a lot of times in the middle of the crisis, and so we're undoing a lot of damage. So it's better if you can do, you know, have these conversations, put these things in place before there's much of a need for it. And I think I saw someone here, and then I'll come back over to you. Yes.
Is there a rule of thumb? Obviously, 9 hours seems like an excessive amount of time for typical students. Is there a number that you think is still within boundaries that you say, well, okay, we've had this amount of time, that's enough? Or do you recommend parents switch off the access to the Wi-Fi at night so that they get to proper sleep?
Yes, so I approach it the opposite way. And so I encourage parents to build up their free time. So how much time a day do you want to spend, do you feel like you need to spend on homework? How much time a day do you need to spend, outside or at sports practice, right? So build up their schedule. I don't think there's a magic number. I think, personally, that if you were to cut that in half, that's still excessive. But I find that when parents approach students by saying, you can only have 3 hours of TV a night, it doesn't work. And so I find the opposite approach more helpful. Having them agree, that's where the contract's helpful, having them agree to certain things. I will work on my homework, I'll come home, have a snack, do an outside activity or something unrelated to technology. I'll do X amount of time for homework, and then afterwards, get screen time. The other challenge is the sleep. So yes, there's a lot of research, this could be a whole other conversation. I don't think that there should be computers in the room or blue screens and that sort of thing. It does affect their sleep. But once again, it's a family by family thing. It'd be great if they weren't doing their homework with their phone as well, but they often need it. So it's just finding that balance. But I think that it's very difficult to go and just throw a number out and say you can only spend X amount of time, because the technology becomes this thing that they like crave and they must have X amount of time. I think it's more about trying to fill their time with other things that are meaningful and building their schedule up so there's not as much time to sit around and be on your phone. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I don't know that there's like a magic number. Yes, over here.
So I do a couple of things, and I wonder if you know of any pitfalls.
Okay, yeah, that's great.
One is I restrict their access. They can't add or delete apps on the phone.
Okay.
And so they kind of earn their privilege of having specific apps. And then I restrict the Safari, so that they can't actually surf the internet for the rest of them. And then the other thing I do is at night I take their phones and I have my fingerprint programs in, and they know it, so they know I'm going to look at their Instagram account or whatever. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
I do. So 2 things. One is that, and I know this is changing constantly, so if I'm incorrect and somebody knows, please let me know. But I know this because when I was at the other school I was at, we blocked access to apps, but students were still able to download them. And that was if they're on different Wi-Fis or things like that. So unfortunately, some of the ways of protecting the phone isn't perfect. So once again, speaking to helping them understand and using the apps properly, or understanding why access to that app isn't helpful. And then in terms of going through and checking it, I think that's a parent by parent decision. Personally, I didn't have a smartphone when I was in high school, but I do think that it's your right as a parent to know what they're talking about, to understand what's going on in the world. My caution is always, if you're doing that and that's something where they're open to and they hand it over to you every day, my caution is if it's becoming a tension point, is trying to help understand what's going on in the world without them feeling like you're, looking at every detail of their life. Because at some point, they will go off and have freedom. And the thing that I see happen a lot, which I find it's very difficult to watch, is they didn't have the ability to test that freedom in the home. So they tested in a big way in college, and the results are much more difficult. So giving them guidance while they're in the home and allowing them to figure out how to navigate the internet. And I don't know how old your kids are, so it depends on their age as well. But I don't think that's a bad strategy. I just think it's maybe something that as they get older, you revise and allow them to prove to you and demonstrate trust. I will also say a lot of the apps, you can, Instagram, you can have, a lot of them have secret accounts where they only post embarrassing pictures of each other for their friends. If you log onto their regular Instagram, you might not necessarily see that. There's ways to hide that. So once again, that's why we don't want to make them feel like they're having to hide everything from us. Like you're like, no technology, no apps, they're going to hide it. We want them to communicate with us about it. Any other questions? I know this is a fun topic. But as I said, I'm happy to chat with anybody later, or feel free to contact me through my website, and I'll answer questions or talk with you. Once again, I'm not an expert. I'm just learning along with everyone. These things are changing all the time, and so it's just about us trying to keep up and keep having conversations so that we can support our young people. So, yes, one question. Sorry, Rebecca.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Have you ever done a presentation toward teenagers as a group rather than individuals?
Yes, I have. I find that it does better with small groups, but yes, I've done that when I was working as a school counselor. So once again, it's just about starting the conversation a lot of the time. And most of the time when I have those meetings with kids, they're like, my parents don't understand, they don't get it, they don't want me to have friends, and so it's once again that communication gap where if those conversations were happening with each other, it's just as great. But yes, I'm always happy to talk to kids about it and maybe give them a different perspective. So, yes.
One of the things that has helped me with my son is, he's the youngest, and he has older siblings. And he has them, I'm not on his Snapchat, but they are. And
Keep tabs.
so if he's ever done anything, he hasn't done too much, fortunately. But they let me know, and they let
That's
him
great.
know. So, it's kind of helpful to kind of, if there's other siblings
Right.
sometimes, to have your children monitor each other, because they're more honest to be,
Right.
to tell them.
Right, and they might be able to talk to them.
That kind of thing.
I think that's a great idea, and once again, a great reason to start having these conversations, because every home is different, every parent is different, and you guys can share strategies, and I think that's great. Sometimes having older kids makes it hard because they want the freedom sooner, but then they can go and navigate, help them navigate it. So, all right, so I'm going to bring James back up, and